you mentioned a growing hunger among Christians for music geared towards children and families. So why do you
Right.
think this is such a prominent desire right now, and how does Getty Music address this?
It's always been a huge thing for us simply because right back to the Shema in the Old Testament, write these truths in your children's hearts.
Mhm.
I think it's an important thing. And through Christian history, teaching our children to sing is important. Obviously, the mediaization and the globalization of culture has taken away something of that pattern of families singing hymns together, singing songs together. If we go back 100 years, what you call the American Sunday school movement, that pretty much everybody who's been to church has experienced, actually began as singing schools. So it began where you would go to church on a Sunday and you'd learn and study the Bible and pray and sing, and then you'd go to singing schools to learn how to sing the songs so you sang them well. Then they would explain what the songs mean, and that was the origin of the Sunday school movement, which then of course moved on and developed beyond that. But that seems to be gone. That's obviously gone now, and we think less about singing as being a way to learn our faith, and I think that's a concern, because the Bible's 20% poetry and songs for a reason. It's not because we're bad people and we don't concentrate during sermons. It's because God made us to sing, and God made us to remember the things that we sing. You and I both know many of our Bible verses because we sang 1 John 4:7 and 8, and all the rest growing up, and seek ye first the kingdom of God. Those were sung. And if we're in a generation where we're singing less and the songs have less truth, then we have to presume that we're going to have a lot less of the Bible dwelling richly in us as we
Mhm.
grow older in our heart, but not just in our minds, in our emotions, in our imaginations. Because if you sing the Bible, then there's something about it that in the emotional connection, that when you hear something that isn't quite right, there's something even intuitively will tell you this is not quite right. You know what I mean? Whereas if it's just an intellectual thing, I feel it doesn't go as deep.
Well, and what I love about your music is you really catechize through your songs. I even think about what is our hope in life and death? Christ alone, right? And so we're
Yeah,
teaching these really important biblical truths even to our children through the music that you all put out, which is really incredible.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that one was obviously cheating because we're just stealing from the Heidelberg Catechism. But yeah, I mean that's exactly right. You know, the New Testament tells us we're letting the word of Christ dwell in us richly when we meet together, singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. And you know, we look at the next. We live in such a transformative generation, informationally, in terms of law, in terms of everything from artificial intelligence to gender to globalization to financial inequality. All of these things are going to reach whole new levels in the next generation, and it is so important. It is a lot of commentators look at the world and go, one of the big differences between 2050 and 2020 will be that basically a lot of people studying society think nominal Christianity will have to die because there is no place for it in a culture. You're either going to be a very serious Christian, grappling with these things, or you'll not survive because there's so many signs, certainly in the Western world, which are challenging us. But that should make us excited as well, because when we're challenged, the church grows. We see that in parts of South America, Africa, but most of all, we see it in East Asia, where the church is in the most hardship. The Sing Conference this year, Patrick Fung is telling the story of facing a task unfinished and really walking us through in 100-year history of China since World War One, when the Red Army said, we are going to eradicate Christianity, which they called it the opium of the masses. That's where that came from. And they said, we're going to eradicate the opium of the masses in a generation. There were 700,000 Christians in China, and they set about one of the bloodiest persecutions ever known. And and of course, changed their education system, changed their government and law structure, and made it almost impossible to have a job. They did a lot of spying on people, and here we are 1 century on, and there's 120, 130 million Christians in China today. And so, it's exciting to see what God is doing. It's exciting to sing. It's exciting to sing with those believers. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, Keith, what advice do you have for families looking to incorporate more singing into their daily worship and routines?
I think the answer is just do it. Do you know what I mean? Krista and I sometimes get mocked a little bit because they go, "Well, you're both in music and you write hymns, so it's kind of convenient that you'd sing hymns with your kids." But honestly, you know, we've had this conversation with some of our band members out there. They're all rehearsing next door for the sing conference, and I mean, one of the guys talks about his dad leading the singing in his house, and his dad only had two notes. It was kind of a low Texan voice that only went sort of in two notes. But he said his dad loved singing so much they got them into it. So, we take something like the iPhone here, and this has led all of us in ways that have not been correct in our lives at times, but we can use it for God's kingdom in so many different ways as well. From streaming the Sing conference and being able to catch it wherever you are, just because you can't have the time or the finances this year, the budget this year to come to Nashville, you can stream the Sing conference, but you can also just create a playlist, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or Apple or wherever you want, of the songs you want your children to grow old with and start playing them and start singing along. And your kids tend to love what you love. If you love singing, they tend to love it too. And so I think it's a lot less about how musically talented your parents are or how many hours a week they spend doing vocal skills and arpeggios than it is loving the Lord and loving to sing great songs about him. But we have to make that effort. Every day in our lives, our kids are going to be listening to songs and singing the truths of those songs into their hearts. So we have to decide, do we want Taylor Swift? Do we want Disney? Or do we want our spiritual leadership in their kids' lives? Because it is crucial.
Mm.